All right, welcome to our August 14th Board of Commissioners meeting. Tonight we have a couple things at our early 5:30 meeting. The first is to discuss the town manager's annual review. And for those of us, Larry's been around long enough, and possibly, Renee as well, may recall what we used previously for Hazen. I hated that form. It asked questions like how the town manager, can you go closer? Okay, thank you. It asked questions like, how does the town manager interact with fire chief, for instance? Like, I don't know, I'm not around enough so it was really difficult for us to do that kind of a review. So I think a lot of the questions were inappropriate, and then it was the same form over and over and over. So I've been elected official for 10 years, and I think we used that form like 8 times in a row or something. And Gina and Mark, have you seen that form? Have you ever seen the one? So it was not a good tool, I don't think, and I don't think it was real meaningful. I often said, I thought, I've had to write many a review in my corporate life, and I always thought that just informing someone where they're doing really well and maybe some opportunities for improvement, in its most simple form is the best kind of review. But about, how long ago was this, Renee, that you got some of these samples for us? It's been several years, I think, right? Two, 3 years ago.
I think these came from a course we did through the School of Government with,
Okay.
that was 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago.
So we can, don't want to spend an exhaustive amount of time on this, but maybe we can go through a couple of ones and you guys and gals can tell us which ones you like and which ones you don't like. Yeah. So we have some samples. There were, Lori was kind enough to print some hard copies, but they're also, they were in our packet and they're up on the screen. You have another one? Lori is always so well prepared. But I think it's really important that we give the manager good feedback and, let her know where she's doing well and where she needs to improve. So this is an example. The first one is from the town of Lexington. When I kind of scroll through that, before we just stare at each one of these, does anybody have any thoughts at all that you've looked at these and have any that you really liked? Or
Mayor, I particularly liked Lexington and Durham County. I think it was.
And why did you like this one, for instance?
I'm chewing into my microphone. But I like the 1 to 5 plus unable to rate. And then the general comments below provide sort of opportunity for conversation. But it's pretty short. It, covers a lot of the things that we need. It doesn't go into how the manager relates to people outside of the board, because we wouldn't know that. And then it's just, I like the simple sort of straightforwardness of it. And that 1 to 5 is much easier than a 1 to 10 scale or any sort of arbitrary numbers.
Ken, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to agree with Renee. I also like the general comments because, if you give a 4, you might be able to explain why, and each one of us will have a different viewpoint. So it could make for better discussion in that meeting. So I think this one was good. This was my favorite. Durham was also good, but I like the opportunity to write general comments.
So what we've done in the past, for those of you that haven't participated in the manager's review, and again, the only 2 employees that report to this board are the town manager and the town attorney. So we would turn in our reviews to Lori, I believe, and she would gather all the comments, correct?
That is an option that you have, but also you could do that yourselves. So that's a subordinate of the manager is not seeing any of these things.
Right.
So the board could choose to assign someone to do that so that the clerk would be completely out of the process.
Then we would meet with the manager, review the comments, and then we also decide on a raise if we're going to give a raise for that year. And we have not done a review in a long time. So it's overdue. Mark?
Okay, there we are. Okay, I'd like to see for each of these categories that we evaluate the town manager, for the town manager or any of our employees that have the ability to do so, is for them to evaluate themselves for exactly the same categories. And then we compare their self-assessment with how we feel they're doing. And we can understand the difference between their perception of how they're doing and our perception. And perhaps there's room for discussion when we get those two different variables.
Thank you. That's a good idea. I like that. We've done the, Lori, have we ever, I think I know the answer. We've done the, what is it called? 365 or 360 or something like that, where you ask colleagues to,
There was a process where staff had done that and the manager was included at the time. Department heads did that. The board has not officially done that. I think members of the board were asked to do it when Hazen participated in the process.
I guess that gives me a question. I mean, is it important to hear from the department heads too on their perception of, because, we don't work with Corey and Becky, on a day-to-day basis. So is it good to have all the department heads weigh in with something brief about how they feel? That way we're getting just not our view. Obviously, we probably have to be
I
able
don't know how appropriate that is or not. I mean, Malia, do you have any thoughts on that? It's not a bad idea. We just have to make sure that we don't ever get into an area where we're saying how the department heads are doing, because they're not, they're not over there. Right, okay. Maureen, can we go to the Durham one? That's the other one that people seem to like. Again, this asks for the questions, what's going well, what needs improvement. I think that's the most effective type of feedback to give to someone. The way we had it with the review format that Hazen had, it just became like creative writing every year, and we were given the same feedback over and over and over. It's like, yeah, you're doing great, and it was, I don't think it was effective at all. I think it was kind of meaningless, really. So go ahead, Mr. Tefano, and then I'll get to you.
I'm missing it in my cursory review. I'd like to see, goals set for the employee, and as well that the employee sets their own goals, and for them to evaluate, for themselves to evaluate how they did in achieving those goals, and also for the board to evaluate how they achieve those goals. I don't see any self goal setting or board goal setting in here. Maybe I missed it in any of these.
I think you're correct.
Yeah.
Commissioner-
So we have an issue of self-evaluation and goal settings, which are really two important aspects of employee evaluation.
Mr. Whitley.
Thank you, Mayor. I like the first one pretty much is what I use and have been using. We use it with the highway patrol, and I implemented it when I came to the church, and I just finished evaluating all the employees. But I like the 1 through 5, and where you can list them pretty much. But Becky, really, between Becky and Charlie, the only two that really answer to this board. I don't see a need to get input from the department here. I think when they do their own evaluation between her and them, they could at that point. But you know, when we hired Becky, we pretty much knew what her job description was and what goals. And I think for the first year, in the position that she's met everyone that I could think of that
Mr. Billy, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're not here tonight to talk about individual things that would be held for a closed session. This is just about the process for the evaluation,
well,
not
my
specifics.
process would be the first one through 5. Okay, thank you.
One of the things that I think is important, I've discussed this with several of the commissioners, is I think we used to have a punch list of, and I think it originated from our planning conference, but we would come up with a list of here are the 25 things that we want to get accomplished this year. And I think quarterly Hazen would bring that back to us and update us on what the progress was, because I'm aware that we've had a couple projects that we voted on. One that comes to mind is the sign at Weddington Road. You know, we voted to put that sign up like 3 years ago and it's still not there for whatever reason. But I think stuff like that kind of falls through the cracks. So it's important to have a list of the things that we agreed to do. Any other comments? We're going to have to, I guess, mark up one of these forms. If we like the first or the one from Durham. To ask Commissioner Tefano, maybe you could mark up, or add to this how you would foresee the, personal goals or whatever. You could add that. And
Or once we decide which one is the consensus of the board, I'll be glad to do that.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, if I were gonna vote on using one as the main blueprint for what we want to do, it definitely would be number 1, Lexington for me.
Well, it doesn't sound like we have a lot of discussion on this. We can take number 1, and anybody on this board can mark it up however they want, or if there's specific things you'd like to see added. Then we'll ask Lori to maybe come back with a modified form that will be the Matthews town manager format. Another thing that we need to do, tangential to this discussion, is we need to have a review for our town attorney as well going forward, because I don't think our current attorney's had a review ever since I've been here that I can recall. It's something we should do also.
Sorry, Lori, did you send out an electronic version of this as well, or is one available? Yeah,
Yes, it's in your email and it's on the website on the agenda pages.
okay,
I'm
thanks.
sorry, no, it's actually just in your email.
Email? Okay, thanks.
All right, so I think the consensus is we like the first one from Lexington. Let's use that one and mark it up and get it back to Lori. Maybe before our next meeting. Is that possible? So that we need to do review. Ken?
Two questions. First, when are we going to schedule the review for? Is that still to be determined?
To be determined, but I would like to do it before the election if possible. I think this board is more familiar with how I'm not saying that we might not all be sitting here again, but I would like this board's very familiar with how the town managers worked. And so I think it'd be important for this board to evaluate her instead of new people, possibly new people.
And then secondly, I think it's important for us or the new board to decide on a date every year that it happens, because, it's been over a year. It's been almost like a year and 6 months, or it should be a 12-month, that 12 months, it should be a review. So whether that's in March or if it's in September, whatever that date is, I'd like that to be implemented as a guaranteed time when it happens.
Typically in the past, we did it in April.
Yep.
I thought, but I know we were locked into the budget this year, but April seemed to be before the end of the fiscal year. is a good time. I would think. That's just one.
Yeah, we've also had the town manager should be somewhat on the same schedule as every other employee as far as getting raises and things like that as well. So when we wait 1.5 or 2 years, then they're not getting that opportunity. So anything further? Anybody got anything else? So again, this was sent electronically in email. Also some hard copies, just mark it up and try to do it in the near future so you don't forget about it, but certainly within next couple of weeks. This may be on maybe the first meeting in September, we can discuss it. If you get the stuff back in a couple of weeks, then you'll have 2 more weeks to put it together. The other thing we have on our sure. Can somebody open the sunroof and turn the fan on? Pretty warm in here. We're waiting for Becky to return. I think most of you heard me say, or if you didn't, I'll say it again, that Commissioner Urban will be joining us at 7 o'clock. He was helping his granddaughter move into college today, so that's why he's not here. All right. Give Becky a few seconds to set up here. The other item we were going to discuss tonight is all the different projects we've discussed possibly spending ARPA funds on, and we have talked about the possibility of using the remainder of our unallocated funds to build the new fire station. But before we pulled that trigger, I wanted to go back and see what other items we had considered using ARPA funds for. So who's going to do this presentation? Is it you, Becky?
It will be led by Malia and Teresa.
Okay.
Good evening, and Mayor and Board. So tonight we're going to talk about the current unfunded ARPA project requests. Back during the planning conference in April, we brought these requests to you. And as of today, we're bringing back the requests to give you an update for the ones that are still currently unfunded. Just a recap of the ARPA funds and the allocation of that. So we received as a town $10,560,996 of ARPA allocation. The board approved and earmarked $1.5 million for affordable housing. And to date, we have encumbrances totaling $1.26 million. We also had the employee premium pay, and those expenses in total came to $853,388. And we also have some expenditures related to use of those funds in the amount of $297,046. So at this time, that brings our available ARPA funds to $6.6 million, $6,647,366 that we have available to use for ARPA funds. Excuse me. So before we get into all of the projects, we wanted to talk about the budget and funding options for Fire Station 3 as it relates to ARPA dollars. As of August the 6th, the total project budget for Fire Station 3 was shy of $9 million. To date, we have encumbrances and expenditures which have all been funded in the amount of $806,000. So the remaining funds needed to complete the Fire Station 3 project at this time is about $8.2 million.
Malia? Yeah, thank
Yes.
you. The total budget, total project budget, is that the total construction budget?
That is,
Commissioner Tefano, that is all of the pre-construction and design services that have been funded to date. It includes the project management fees that have been funded to date. It includes construction, and it also includes all of the costs on the town's side of the ledger that we still have to fund, like our electrical connections, FF&E, things like that.
So it does not include staffing, equipment, upfitting, et cetera, and now training and all the associated costs?
No, this is the project budget for the construction of the facility.
Can ARPA funds be used for staffing purposes?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, when we start bringing the firemen and women on staff and we're paying them salaries, and we're probably going to have them there prior to the fire station becoming operational, is that something that can be paid for by ARPA funds as well?
So all ARPA funds have been supplanted into general fund dollars. When we set the FY24 budget, it included dollars in the FY24 budget to go towards construction. When you set the tax rate, those will then show up in your operating budget in FY25 to fund those staffing positions. So we do not intend to hire anybody to staff Fire Station 3 until FY25.
So construction is not going to be complete until FY25. That's a correct assumption?
If the project moves forward as scheduled, construction would be complete during FY25.
Do you have an approximate month in FY25?
Was it December of June?
Of 26,
So,
January 1st of 25?
which is FY25.
Okay. Thank you. So when you start hiring people in order to be ready to staff the station by January 1st, 25?
We would fund those positions in the FY25 budget. And so those dollars would be free to start hiring folks to come on board as early as July 1. Rob and I have worked through a few different scenarios depending on how many folks come on board who need training versus are already certified, to stagger them so that you are ideally fully operational when you open up the doors January 1st of 2025.
So I'm assuming if our operational costs for a town are made fairly consistent during FY25, that's going to necessitate another tax increase for FY25
No,
for the personnel?
no, that was built into the FY24 budget.
You have an approximate cost of what the total turnkey is going to be the day they turn the key and actually become operational?
Commissioner Stefano, I think we frequently use different terms when we're looking at how we budget and how we fund. So we have looked at what we anticipate needing in FY25 to staff and operate the facility. And that is built into the tax rate as we understand it at this time. It's about $1.58 million to fund the new personnel and operations of that facility.
Yeah, to me, it's cost. It's not budgeting and where the money comes from. It's total cost. So we have 9 million in construction, 1.5 million in personnel, et cetera, and probably going to be additional costs from that. So we're already up to 10.5 million for the cost of the fire station. And it's turnkey operation. In other words, the day that it becomes fully operational, all the costs that have been incurred from the moment it was originally conceived up to the moment that it was actually fully operational. That's the number I'm looking for. Thank you.
Just like to note that we're not going to have to pay all the salaries on January 1st, 2025. That'll be paid for over the entire year. So it won't be 10.5 million on January 1st. It'll be the $9 million figure plus whatever the cost is for staffing, which is about 1.5.
Right, but again, it doesn't matter when you pay for it, how it's budgeted, where the funds come from. It's the total cost, and that number continues to be elusive. It's close to 11 million. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Malia.
So as shared, the remaining funds needed to complete this project is shy of a little over $8.2 million. Currently, we do have committed funding. We have the FY24 CIP funds in the amount of 1.5 million. We also have fiscal year 23 funds that we encumbered and rolled over. Those funds were in support of the project management expense. So the total remaining funding needed, when you take into consideration the committed funding, is $6.6 million. So this slide here gives the total one-time estimated costs for all of the project requests that are currently unfunded. This is inclusive of Fire Station 3 for the $6.6 million, which you saw on the previous slide. The remaining projects include the town stormwater assessment, phase 1 in the amount of $650,000. And in your packet, you should have supplemental documents that provide an overview of each of those projects. We also have the bike pedestrian connection from Riverbanks to 4 Mile Creek in the amount of $156,000. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan in the amount of $120,000. Town Hall hood room audio visual upgrades in the amount of $400,000.
Those audio and video upgrades, we voted on April 24th to approve and fund.
So the action that we had was to pursue an RFP for that, which is currently underway. And so we'll get those dollars back, and those quotes back. And then at that point, the board would make the decision to fund. So the 400,000 was an estimate based on numbers that we had, but we wanted to pursue an RFP, which is in progress.
In addition to Town Hall, we have audio visual upgrades for the Matthews Community Center in the amount of $57,000. And then the Jordan Room in the amount of $4,710. We also wanted to provide the opportunity to include any additional projects that the board might be considering or desire at this point. So that's where you have the other projects listed. But in total, when you include all of the projects that are currently unfunded, that one-time estimated cost is $8 million, a little over $8 million.
Got a question for CJ. What did a few years ago, didn't we do some upgrades at the Matthews Community Center? Wasn't that lighting or something? Is that
We did windows. We did window repair.
I thought we did lights as well, or audio or something, didn't we?
It was a sound system
Sound system.
for the theater.
Yeah, I was gonna say there were a few things that were done in that period. There was also the AC that was upgraded. Can you hear me okay? Sorry, the AC was also upgraded, and we also upgraded the windows. And I think we did the roof as well, kind of in that period.
But was anything done with audio visual?
Yeah.
Probably did.
Here. Corey's probably the better person to speak to this.
Like Becky mentioned, we did upgrade the sound in Fullwood Theater a couple of years ago. That's been the only audio visual upgrade.
Okay, that's what I'm remembering. Mayor Pro Tem?
So what is the audio and visual upgrades now? What is that?
Designed for room 104. which is our primary meeting room. We do rent it quite often, as well as hold our own internal meetings, and also some options for the community room. The largest room in the bottom. Again, most of it is an effort to, I guess, improve the attractiveness of the building to rent, and offer an opportunity for people to use some of the upgrades in the audiovisual technology.
What kind of upgrades is?
So in 104, it is a new monitor, an upgraded camera, some options for additional sound around the room. It's pretty much the basics of it. Also included some upgrades in the internet in that room also. And then in the community room, same sort of deal. A couple of options with some different display monitors on the wall. Same deal with sound, microphones, some small speakers and the like.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a comment that I recently went to a Metropolitan Transit Commission subcommittee meeting in Charlotte at the Government Center. And their audio visual system is awesome. I mean, they have the microphones drop down from the ceiling above the people that are speaking, crystal clear video. Several people were calling in from all over the country. You could see it really clearly. A really nice audio system is nice, and makes having a meeting, you can hear everybody very clearly. I know it's expensive, but makes a big difference in having an effective meeting to have good sound and visual.
So to continue on, excuse me. As mentioned on the previous slide, your total one-time estimated cost for those list of projects is $8,035,155. The total remaining ARPA funds is $6,647,366. So taking into consideration those two amounts, your total additional funding needed to complete all of those listed projects would be $1,387,789. So Teresa's going to come up to talk about what funds are available and talk in detail about that with you all.
Before we go there, can I ask CJ another question? Sorry, CJ. How critical would you say the stormwater study is?
Yeah, I think it's something that we need to fund one way or another. We don't know what we don't know right now. So we have assets sitting underground and we don't know the condition they're in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. So as Malia mentioned, the total cost to fund these projects that have just been mentioned tonight is a little over $8 million. We do have the $6.6 million of ARPA funds available. Then the other options to fund the remaining projects vary depending on the project. So this slide and the next slide will kind of take in conjunction together. We would recommend limited use of general fund balance of $225,000 to help us maintain the 34% fund balance per town policy. There is an option for debt financing for some of these projects that would not necessarily use the particular item as collateral, but we would use another asset in the town as collateral to around $926,000. There is the option to take out a $7.1 million loan against the fire station, using the fire station as collateral. One of the projects would potentially qualify as part of the bond proceeds if there were excess funds available. Stormwater fund balance, this is a correction from the original document that was sent out because we did it didn't include the uses that we had already earmarked for the current fiscal year. So the current balance is $400,000, and our recommendation would be to not use any of that fund balance towards the project. And then one of the projects would qualify for tourism fund balance, which currently has a balance of $1.4 million. And that project is the $57,000 for the upgrades in the community center. So if you look at this slide, it walks us through the funding options, which, I mean, general fund balance is always an option. However, if we used general fund balance for all of these, it would take our fund balance way below our 34%. The stormwater assessment that you were just speaking to CJ about is available to use stormwater fund balance. However, we are at a pretty low balance right now, and we're not, sure when or if, there will be any increase in the fees. And then the $57,000 at the community center would be available. Tourism fund balance could be used for that project. The other projects, you either use general fund balance, or we take out debt to cover the cost of these items.
And just to clarify, there's no suggestion that we take out a loan for $7 million, simply listing that's the
As an
maximum
option.
amount of all of the projects that qualify under that category. When do we receive stormwater funds? Do we receive them ongoing, or are they?
Yes, throughout the year.
And do you have a projection of what that,
The projected amount for this year is $903,000. Therefore, we have allocated $57,286 of fund balance in the current budget to meet the projected expenditures for that department.
and then there's also capital.
Right, and there are $360,000 worth of capital equipment purchases in the FY24 budget that would come out of that fund balance, which brings it down to the 400,000 instead of 800,000.
Mr. Tufano?
Yes, Teresa, do you happen to have a figure for every $100,000 reduced from the general fund balance, what that reduces the percentage by?
I do not right here today.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry to ask that question, on your feet like that. But the reason I'm going with that is I have a suggestion to fund this fire station, which would require that information.
Okay, I mean, I can get that information for you.
Thanks.
And you want to know what each $100,000?
Yeah, $100,000 reduced from the general fund, how that would reduce the percentage of our fund balance.
Well, that's always, I mean, we can get close for what the last year was, but with the way the fund balance percentage depends on how we end the year every year with
Sure.
expenditures versus revenues.
Sure, it would be an estimate for sure. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So are you finished with your presentation?
Yes.
So one of the reasons that I wanted to go over this tonight is, are there any of these projects that anyone on this board feels like are not really, we shouldn't be prioritized, or maybe we don't have to do now, or we just not do them? These are some of the ones that we talked about. Or is there any thoughts of maybe eliminating one or more of them so that we don't have to fund them? Mayor Pro Tem?
One that I feel strongly that we should do is the hood room audio and visual upgrades. I think it, increases the transparency when people can hear and see us well. And from staff's perspective, it's pretty hard to use. So I think that's probably my top priority out of everything.
Commissioner Hoover?
Okay, I want to go back to the August meeting. I'll make sure I'm understanding correctly. Because here it says all remaining ARPA CLFRF funds are allocated to this project. Then there was only 142,000 plus balance remaining. If we put everything down on the fire station, am I correct what this is saying?
Which meeting is that from?
The August, was it August 2nd? We had the meeting about the fire station.
I remember that number.
Okay, so if we paid cash for everything on the fire station, that is the balance we would have left over to come up with. That was my understanding.
That was based on August numbers. Mhm.
Okay,
And if we don't fund any of these,
exactly.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, question. Have we gotten the $1 million grant yet from the community project funding?
Is that for the affordable housing?
Uh-huh.
We have not received notification yet regarding whether or not we've received that grant.
Okay, because it says here, I went to the website and it says recipient Town of Matthews, and it says 1 million. And so
Well,
I'm looking,
that's good news, but they haven't shared it with us yet.
well,
So
it says right there, I printed
That's
it out. Okay, so this is my thinking and my idea. Okay, we have a remaining balance, if we go like I just asked with the 142,000 balance left over. And I know, here we go, this is just me thinking here, talking. If we use the 1.5 million for affordable housing and pay that 142,000 plus, that leaves us a balance of over 1,357,000 plus. We are requesting all these projects. That comes to a total of 1,387 plus. If we took that from the balance of the remaining balance from the affordable housing, that then gives the town to find $30,000 and $5,525 that we would have to find in the general fund budget to fund everything. So if we get this 1 million from the project funding, there's our 1 million for affordable housing. HUD currently has an 85 million grant they are giving out, and they are giving $1 to $10 million for affordable housing, and the deadline to file is October 30th. So there could be possible more money for affordable housing. So I just feel like if we're going to get serious also about affordable housing, we also need to start holding the developers accountable. So we need to also update our UDO. I've gone through Davison, Mooresville, what they require. And I think if we want affordable housing in this town, then it's time to start holding the developers accountable. And instead of having what I call affordable rent, because that's really all we're getting for 10 years. Oh, we'll give it to you in an apartment for 10 years, affordable rent. No, to me, that's not affordable housing. Affordable housing is home ownership. And if we're going to have affordable housing, that's what we need to focus on. But that's just my idea of having a way to get everything we need paid for in cash, only costing about $30,000 extra out of the general fund balance. We'll get the 1 million here, and we can apply for a grant from HUD. And
We can't,
I don't see why they would turn us down for affordable housing, because that's a hot topic right now.
Well, Commissioner Hoover, I do know that the federal grant that you referenced is a matching grant. So in order to, not the HUD grant, the one that you said we just got the notification of, that it requires us to match it. So we would have to come up with our own $1 million to receive the $1 million in the federal, to receive those funds.
Okay. So where would we use this money then anyway?
That is a separate conversation, wherever the board directs us to use the funds.
Okay.
Lori, did you capture all that? Because there was a lot of math going on there, but appreciate the suggestion. Commissioner Tofano.
Yes, in keeping with what Commissioner Hoover was saying, if we have to go into debt financing without touching the 1.5 million that's allocated for housing, what we're actually telling the public is that we're going into debt in order to finance affordable housing. So what we're going to do, and what I'd like to do, in my opinion, is take $800,000 or $900,000 of that affordable housing, match it with $500,000 out of the fund balance, pay for everything in cash, and everything else stays intact.
Let me go back to my request a few minutes ago. Are any of these projects, does anybody have any desire to eliminate any of these projects from our list? Nobody really commented on that. Are all these super high priority? We need to absolutely do them right now. Commissioner Garner.
Well, I think one of the things that we keep coming up against is that it's, when we discuss these things, it's all or nothing, right? And we never sort of find that middle ground or the compromise. And so that would be my question to staff, is to come back and with what can be scaled back, what is, what is the absolute number, what are their priorities, maybe the top 4 or 5 priorities. And like I said earlier, I understood it that when we said yes to the RFPs on the audiovisual equipment, we were saying yes to the funding, just finding out who was the lowest bidder or the most qualified bidder coming back. So, I mean, I think some of this has to go back to staff, and staff has to come back to us and say what they're willing to do. We need some comparison numbers, not just like this is what you have to do sort of pressure.
And I do just want to clarify that this is not intended to be an all or nothing list. We didn't feel like we had board direction on what the priorities were for these. And certainly they can be a la carte. They can be, delayed or prioritized as the board wishes. I'd say if the board is looking for a suggestion, the pedestrian connection from Riverbanks to 4 Mile Creek, it's certainly important, but that is something that between bond proceeds, if those are issued in the next few years, that's a relatively small number to be able to fit in with hopefully some excess bond dollars. And it's also a low enough cost that if we needed to try to program it into a CIP in a future year, I think that's something that we could bite off. But I'm not sure as far as the priority of that project, if the board wants to see it move faster than that, that would slow us down for a couple of years for that project.
And what about the Parks and Rec master plan? Is that not eligible for bond?
No, the bond is going to be limited to property acquisition, design of a specific site, and then the construction of it. So we did check on whether the master plan would be eligible. It's more of a conceptual, town-wide vision for what we want. That's really outside the scope of what's intended to be covered with the bond language.
And I know Charlie's not here, but is that eligible for tourism dollars?
My next question.
We previously floated that and unfortunately got turned down already.
Would, no.
Yeah, the number that's really mind blowing to me is $400,000 for, and I know that it is what it is, but my goodness, I mean, I haven't been to Best Buy in a while. I guess they're not open anymore, but I mean, almost $500,000 for audiovisual just seems like off the charts, crazy expensive.
We do have a expert who we have found who is going to help us go through those proposals and help make sure that they are scaled down and not overdoing what's needed for the room. So we're maybe cautiously optimistic that that number could tighten and hopefully be lower than what it currently is.
Good. Yeah, I was kind of in agreement with the town manager's assessment of the bike pedestrian connection. I don't think that's super urgent in my view, that we could maybe pull that one off.
Did you say that the community center audio and visual could be under tourism?
Community center can, yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Tufano.
Yes, in all of our deliberations, I would really encourage everyone to try to come up with a plan in order to pay cash for this, because we've already suffered from inflation rates, higher interest rates. We're already way over what we originally anticipated for Fire Station 3. And by taking out debt financing in addition to that adds to the cost of the fire station. The Federal Reserve is seriously contemplating raising interest rates by another 0.25%. Inflation has no indication of a reducing, and adding an additional debt service to the cost of the fire station, I think would be unacceptable. There's cash there to pay for this. We just have to be mature about it and realize that there's some projects that perhaps we would have liked to have fully funded, but we can cut them back. Affordable housing is definitely one of those. And like I said, if we ever have to go into debt for Fire Station 3 without touching affordable housing funds, we're actually telling the public that we're going into debt in order to fund affordable housing. And I don't think that would be acceptable to anyone. Thank you.
So Mr. DeFarno, you're saying take money from the affordable homes to pay for this?
Correct, to pay cash, so we don't have to go into debt.
Talk about cash. You're suggesting take the 1.5 million.
800,000.
Why would you touch that?
Because they need to pay cash for this without having to go into debt.
It's two different things.
No, it's not.
Commissioner Hoover just stated, affordable homes are the hottest thing on around. And now she put the burden on the developers. But now you saying that we put in the budget for affordable home, 1.5 million, and you want to take that, that's the commissioner's decision, what you're asking to do.
Yeah, and you can change that decision. What you're actually saying is if we don't touch the affordable housing 1.5 million, we're going to potentially put the town in debt.
But let me ask you this, Mr. DeFarno, what have you done with the 1.5?
What have you done?
What have we done?
Nothing.
Thank you.
That's on our agenda this evening. We'll talk about that. So I think I heard Commissioner Garner ask, you asking staff to give their priority of these projects? Is that the ask?
I mean, generally, that's kind of how our budgeting system works, is that staff comes with a want. We say, what can you do without? And they come back and say, this is what we can do without. So I'm saying, you know, I've been an advocate for a little while, at least, on cutting back on Fire Station 3 so that the cost isn't so high. So I would like to see that happen. I would like to see, you know, maybe that Riverbanks crossing is does go to the bonds. Maybe we look at using tourism fund balances for the community center upgrades. But at some point there has to be a give and take. It's not, we can't issue checks for all of the wants on these lists. And I understand that they're maybe elevated from being a want, but you know, it's ARPA funds are not to be looked at as part of the budget. They're extraordinary funds meant to gird us against future emergencies. And so we have to, in my mind, we have to take that as our North Star on these decision-making things. And, you know, and we have seen from Zoom meetings over during the pandemic that yes, audiovisual is essential for community engagement through an emergency. That makes sense to me. The fire station has to happen, maybe not to the extent of being a $9 million fire station. That makes sense to me. Stormwater makes sense to me, but with all of the flooding that we've seen, but you know, how do we make all these numbers work? We're not the budget experts in this room. We're not the subject matter experts. And so we give that information back and say, hey, you know, you only have X number of dollars to play with, and what are you going to do with it?
And I think part of the challenge is certainly when I look at this list, some of these things are, you know, in a perfect world, we would be, you know, having enough stormwater fees to come in that we're putting money aside to be able to pay for these stormwater assessments. You know, our Parks and Recreation Master Plan, we ran into this with our comprehensive plan as well. These are documents that we know need to come back every 10, if, 15 years max. And so ideally, we would be setting aside dollars every year to be able to pay for them when they come up. We're unfortunately in a situation where that hasn't been the way that the town has budgeted historically. Funds haven't been set aside like that. And so, I think put, CJ in a page with, Corey and be fighting it out for, which one
Pay-per-view.
is more important when they both have their legitimate points to them, and they meet very different needs for our community. It's certainly an exercise that we could do. I guess the ask for today, as we understood it, was let's revisit the projects that the board had looked at previously and look at what other types of funding sources are available for them if the board in fact wants to move forward. If there's a different ask from the board out of today, we're certainly happy to go try to do that. But, some of these things could certainly be pushed or prodded or partially funded. But, I quite frankly don't know how to pay for the stormwater assessment at $650,000 with the current format of funding that we have. It's too big to bite off with the revenue sources that we do have.
When will we have hard numbers for the audiovisual upgrade?
When does that RFP close? Did that include quotes, or is it just responsive as far as qualifications? But it would include numbers. Okay. So that'll be back to the board. I'm sorry, you said what? When? Second meeting in September.
I guess maybe some of the frustration I'm getting is something like the stormwater assessment. This was the first year that I'd really heard about it. And if it's such a dire issue, why hasn't it been spoken of? I mean, if it's such a dire issue, it didn't just come up. It had to have been an issue for 2-3 years. And so why wasn't this talked about before then? And we could have set aside $150,000 a year for X amount of years to pay for it. Is it really that desperate, or did it and sprung on us like that? Or has it been desperate for 4 years and we just have been ignoring it?
There's a fair number of things like that I would say never made it to be lifted up. That from a best practice standpoint, we would have benefited from having that in place a long time ago. CJ, I don't know if you want to speak any more to the need or the benefit to having an assessment like that, but I know you're supposed to go in cycles and do a portion of the system every year.
We've also had how many 500-year floods in the last 2 years or something. So it's crazy.
So, yeah, so it is part of an ongoing thing. That is only the first step in it. We're actually looking at doing like 11 years to actually map out the condition of the whole system. So this 650,000 is only to map out the older parts of town that have the oldest stormwater areas that are likely to be, in the worst condition, to try to get a handle of what actually has to be repaired. So that's the other part of this. This is just the assessment. This doesn't include actually fixing whatever they happen to find.
Yeah, and then it feels like you're going down a massive slippery slope, and then in a future budget, we're gonna have to find a huge amount of money. So that's the concern, is like, if it's really been this dire for this long, I've been on the board for 4 years. Why is this, first time we're hearing about it?
Mayor, I want to clarify too, that I'm not asking Corey and CJ to be put in a cage together and fight it out. I'm asking for them to come to you if you put on your management hat and decide how to do this.
Okay, well, I think staff has done what I believe I was the person that asked for this, and you have satisfied what I wanted. Bring forth what we had previously discussed as possible projects, what the cost is, and where we could possibly fund them. I'm in general agreement that we should use debt financing as little as possible, if at all. But I would not be in favor of robbing our affordable housing funds that we've earmarked. Well, maybe there's another way to do it. I think, Gina, you said a lot in a minute. I'd like to look at your numbers again. Maybe there's another way to possibly do this, where we don't have to incur additional debt. So I guess the ask again for the town manager is to have staff prioritize these projects. Is Commissioner Garner?
I do want to kind of say that debt, we don't want to put money on our credit cards in our home budget, but there is a certain amount of debt that's healthy for the town. And so we need to think about that in terms of long-term financing for some things. It's something that, that's how you build your credit and your home budget. It's also sort of how we maintain our credit as a town. So if that's something, it's not quite as scary as it sounds, I think. I do agree that paying cash upfront, if you can, is a smart move. But let's not be as afraid of it as we would maxing out a credit card.
What is our current debt? How much does the town own?
We use less than 1% of our debt capacity. The actual dollar amount, I don't know offhand.
Well,
And when does current debt roll off and, can it be replaced with other dollars?
So we had some debt roll off going into FY24 that freed up some available dollars. I'd have to look at the debt schedule to see when it's coming off next.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I do want to make a point. I agree. I'd like to pay cash for the fire station, but we are in a unique position that other municipalities haven't been in, as we do have some ARPA funds to use for this, where other towns may have had to take out the whole $9 million in debt. So, if you think about that in a percentage, we could be only taking out, a 20th of the debt that other municipalities had to, if that's where we need to go.
Yeah, just a brief note here, a $7.1 million loan over a period of 10 years at an interest rate of 4%, which is very generous. It's $1.5 million in interest. Thank you.
Yeah, I certainly don't think there's any interest of anybody in this board taking out a $7 million loan. But fair point. Interest adds up. It does for sure. All right. Any other comments? I think, having staff maybe try to prioritize these somehow. And then I think a future ask would be for everybody on this board to prioritize them after we get the input from staff. And maybe a couple of these roll off and we'll, we just don't fund them now, or we do them with bond money later or something like that.
Can't that be done at the same time? Why, while staff prioritizes theirs, why can't we do ours to speed up?
We could. I thought, my thought was that we might want staff to help inform our
Fair.
But we could do it at the same time. It doesn't matter. I think I've heard everybody say that, I think I speak for everybody, that the audio visual upgrades are of great importance. I hear after every one of our meetings, I'll run into somebody at the store or whatever, and I say, I couldn't hear a word you said. They were trying to watch the meeting and they couldn't hear. So that's really not fair to our constituents that they can't hear what we're saying. Don't necessarily have to see us, but they ought to be able to at least hear what we're saying. So what's the will of the board? Do you guys want to do rank these ourselves concurrently with staff, or do you want staff to come back and rank them? Or
I'd like to do them concurrently.
okay. So can we do this as with our other asks? Can we do this in a couple of weeks? Before our next meeting, and then we'll give Lori a couple of weeks to put everything together. So we'll discuss this at our meeting a month from now. Does that sound good? All right. If there's nothing else, we'll take a quick break and reconvene at 7 o'clock.
Obviously, in today's world of chaos, we must stand strong and for what is right and not let evil overtake our lives in our great country. Some in this room will understand this Old Testament quote when I say it, but written in the 8th century, these words of warning from the Old Testament, book of Isaiah, could not be more relevant today. So hopefully they'll take heed in these words. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and lightness for darkness, and who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Isaiah 5:20. So my second part is I just wanted to offer a simple prayer tonight, whether it's for the police, fire, EMS, town staff, the citizens of Matthews, your individual families, and yourself. It's a simple prayer for protection. The light of God surround us. The love of God enfold us. The power of God protect us. The presence of God watch over us. The mind of God guide us. The law of God direct us. Wherever we are, God be our strength and our harbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Urban. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance now. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. All right, I'd like to ask the town manager if there's any additions, deletions, or movements within the agenda.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as
So
published.
moved.
We have a second? A motion for Mayor Pro Tem McCool, a second by Commissioner Whitley. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.